Prologue. Chapter 7. Day 5. Morning. Dearest Wilma, do you remember the first time I visited Newcrest? We'd become close friends over the summer. I even introduced you to my parents while your father was occupied with one of his business excursions. Regretfully, the fact that their little Alexander had finally made a friend overrode concerns for your well-being, though you didn't seem to care. We stayed up all night, listening to Mortimer's tales of the macabre and talking about life beyond the stars. September came all too soon. Thoughts of the metaphysical and nocturnal trips to the archives were replaced by the overwhelming realization that I would be spending the next 9 months in a small, windowless room, reviewing subjects that I had mastered years ago. I had taken to writing letters to you, dearest Wilma, out of sheer boredom. Mrs. Lewis seemed to think that I was writing to an imaginary friend, or practicing my penmanship. The second week of school, Mrs. Lewis made an announcement. I remember the way her brown eyes sparkled when we took our seats that morning. I couldn't help but feel excited, too. "Hello, class. I have some great news for y'all today. How many of you have heard of a family tree?" She turned to the blackboard, scrawling family tree in perfect cursive letters. "How about you, Alexander?" she said. She had not bothered to see if anyone else had raised his hand. A family tree is a diagram that demonstrates one's lineage. It includes marriages, birth and death dates, children, and siblings." "Very good, Alex," said Mrs. Lewis. She turned her attention to the class. "Very good, Alex. In other words, it shows who your mom and dad are, who their parents are, and their parents before that. 6 weeks from today, all of you will be submitting a report. Whoever has the most complete, detailed family tree will be awarded a 500 simoleon scholarship to Smithsonian University." That night, I told Mortimer about the project. With his help, I was able to come up with the following diagram. When I asked him if there were any more members to our family, he said, "I can't recall, son, but I do still have some of my grandfather's old journals." "Which one?" "My mother's father, the one called Simon Crumplebottom. He might have been a strange, stubborn old man, but he wrote everything down." "What made him strange?" "Well, it was just a feeling at first," he began. He gestured towards the vacant spot on the love seat beside him. I obliged. "One summer, my parents and I went back to the old country to spend a week with my grandparents. This was before we moved to Pleasantview, where I met your mother. It was the longest week of my entire life. All of my friends were back in Sunset Valley, for starters. I swear the Crumplebottoms didn't believe in having fun. I wasn't allowed to read mysteries, eat sweets, or play with the local children. Which explains why your Aunt Agnes turned out the way she did. The house was dark and dreary, too. Can you imagine? Not a spot of red paint to be found anywhere. I had to sleep in the servants' quarters. A tiny, unfinished room with a straw mattress. I only had a thin, raggedy blanket to keep me warm at night, and that house was unnaturally cold. I don't think I would have survived if it hadn't been the summer. Even so, I think I could have managed to fall asleep had it not been for my grandfather's late-night calls. The Crumplebottoms were the first family in town to have a telephone. The phone was placed in the study, which is right next to the servants' quarters. Can't imagine who would have wanted to talk to grandfather for a few minutes, let alone carry on hours-long conversations. He never smiled. He seemed to care more about work than he did about people. It was as if the whole of humanity was too mundane for his liking. And he never spoke to his callers in Simlish. He spoke mostly in Latin or French. I could ignore it when he spoke those. It was the third language that kept me awake those midsummer nights. It was a thick, guttural tongue, and deeply ancient. The sound was awesome and totally detestable. I couldn't tell you a word of what he said, but I would surely recognize the tongue if I heard it again. I marveled at the thought of a language inspiring, at once, wonder and loathing. My curiosity was so strong in that moment that I would have given the world to hear it spoken. It now seems shag bethunk gotha epgoka. Mortimer must have noticed the faraway look in my eye, for he soon changed the subject to books. "Have you finished the Llama Boy series yet?" he asked me. I had. Those books now seemed so childish. It was hard to think that, but a few months ago, I had been so eager to pry beneath that yellow spine that I risked life, limb, and weeks of grounding to get my hands on the next one. "Alex? Yes? What are you thinking, old sport?" I can't believe that Great-Grandpa didn't let you read anything," I lied. "But that's not exactly true," Mortimer replied. He shifted in his seat. "I was allowed to read anything in his personal library. He got some really strange books, though, especially for a man of science. He kept books on long disproven subjects, like phrenology, astrology, and alchemy. I considered the possibility that he was a collector of old books, but then I saw what he kept on his desk. Underneath a letter he had written the night before, which mentioned something about one Pierre Morel, something about the ashes of people. Anyway, boring stuff. There was a large, antediluvian tome. I couldn't read the title, as it was written in Old Simlish, but I did notice a little stem sticking out from between the pages. I opened it. That little stem belonged to a death flower. At this juncture, I could no longer contain my excitement. "What does a death flower look like?" I blurted. Mortimer was taken aback by the sudden interjection. He shifted away from me, then gave the hasty explanation. "It's a daisy-like flower with red or purple petals, slender black sepals, and a disc that looks like a skull." He eyed me warily. "You remind me of him, in a way. I mean that in only the most positive regard." "I took the death flower," he continued. "Only then did I realize what the book was. Lady Ravendancer's book of spells." I ran out of the room and stuffed the flower under my pillow. That night, as I was lying on that straw mattress, I heard frenzied shouts and shuffling. Grandfather was rummaging through papers. "Where is it? Where is it?" he cried. I clutched at the flower I had hidden earlier that day. All I could think was, I cannot let him have it. Next day, he was found dead. Cremated the same day, too, the old goat. "What's so bad about cremation?" I asked. "A Goth is always buried, Alex. That way we can rise from the grave." Now, good night.